Welcome to another edition of Real, Raw, and Honest. Thank you so much for those of you who have stuck with me as we've been talking about fear, stress, and anxiety. I want you to know we're switching the corner now. We're turning things around. We're going to be discussing something different. We're going to be leaving that in the past. I'll probably revisit it in the future sometime, but here we are, and we're going to be discussing relationships. And we're going to be doing this for a few weeks. And what I want to do is I want to discuss relationships that are not healthy. I want to talk about relationships, the kind that I talk about with people, the kind where I bring inner healing to, where I help to bring understanding and bring the relationship back together. The kind of relationship that maybe you find yourself married to a narcissist, or maybe you find yourself struggling with some of those narcissistic tendencies. I want to be very clear when we get started that when I talk about narcissism, which is something that I do not want to have to go into because you can find that information at any click of the button on YouTube, on Facebook, on TikTok. You can look it up. Like, there's just so much information on that. You can buy books. There's just a lot that you can find. It's just really kind of, a topic that's really been overpopulated, if I can use that term. And there's so many people, professionals and non-professionals, talking about narcissism. And no, just because you have a disagreement with someone does not make them a narcissist. Just because you see something in someone does not make them a narcissist. There are certain criteria that they have to have in order to be a narcissist, a clinically diagnosed narcissist. I can't do that for you, but I do know this, that, you can have a disagreement with someone, and it just can be a disagreement that you've had with them. It doesn't mean that there's anything over and above that. So strap in today as we start pulling apart relationships that are unhealthy. In particular, maybe emotionally abusive, physically abusive, sexually abusive. Yes, you can be in a marriage that's sexually abusive. I've had conversations with women in my office who have told me some things that I'm like, wow, that's not okay. If you're not okay with it, that's not okay. And so we're talking about that. So the one thing that we find very often is that people will go, well, I don't feel like I can leave. Or we have people that say, I don't know why they just don't leave. I don't know why they'd put up with that kind of behavior, why they'd allow themselves to be hit, or, why they allow themselves to be demeaned and yelled at. And so that's the bottom line of what we're going to be talking about here today a little bit, is just looking at that and going, how does that happen to an individual? Why is it that people stay? Maybe you're relating to this and you can go, wow, this is going to be uncomfortable. Well, listen to it if you can. If you can't listen to it, then opt out. If you can listen to it in chunks, listen to it in chunks. There's nothing to say you have to stay for the full 20 minutes to half an hour. But at the end of the day, I hope to give you some information that's going to be helpful and valid. And if it doesn't happen today, hopefully it'll happen over the next couple of weeks. So, I just want to clarify who your abuser is. Your abuser does not have to be your spouse. It does not have to be a parent. An abuser can be a brother, it can be a sister, it can be a pastor, it can be a boss, a family friend, another member of the family, a grandfather. It can be anybody who comes into your life who feels that they have the right to run over top of your opinions and your thoughts. That is an abuser, somebody who comes in and does what they want in order to get what they want. And they don't care whether they harm you or someone else in the process. So that's an abuser, somebody who will get their way regardless of the consequences to another individual. So that's what we're talking about. And so, this is a conversation I found myself having with people who will either, who I talk to, in ministry, in my inner healing practice, and people will come in and they'll begin to talk to me about their spouse. And there's oftentimes, as I listen, that I go, well, they believe that their spouse is a narcissist, and I'm like, well, that doesn't actually fit the bill. And as we have conversation, as I kind of poke and pry, very often we can begin to label somebody a narcissist if we have wounds from our past. And those things if we don't deal with them, what they do is they color our relationships around us, and they make us believe that the people that disagree with us, or don't want to do something that we want to do, or argue with us about a thought that we have, that person then is against us and they're wanting to harm us, when really it's just that we need to deal with some wounding from the past. And then all of a sudden we can have better relationships. But the other thing that I find is, and I have indeed found this, that there are people who come in and begin to talk to me and they believe that their spouse is a narcissist, only to find out that as we're having conversation, that they're the one who seems to have more narcissistic tendencies than their spouse does. And if you are not a narcissist, as you begin to deal with your wounds and your pain from your past, as you allow the Lord to come in and to bring healing to you and counsel you and give you wisdom and understanding, that all of a sudden you begin to change. And then your relationship can suddenly look different, sound different, feel different, and you begin to have a grace for your spouse that you didn't have before, and you begin to have a grace for yourself that you did not have before, because you find yourself healing and changing. So there's a lot of things in this conversation as I bring it forward that I want you to consider as I go forward. And so I've had many conversations with people that have come to me to talk to me about their relationships. And, I hear the same thing very frequently. They were so kind in the beginning. They were so loving in the beginning. They were the kind of person who met all of my needs. They couldn't wait to do something nice for me. They were generous. They weren't stingy. They weren't difficult. They were good looking. They were charming. They were funny. They're not the ugly person that they've become. And so it's like and very often I'll hear people say, it's like, when they started to emerge, I was so shocked to find that this is the person I'd fallen in love with. And then they'll always say the same thing. They'll say, well, you know what? But that person still emerges every once in a while. And when that person emerges, then I know why I fell in love with them. Well, let me tell you something. The unfortunate truth is who they are most of the time, or over time, is who they are. It's who they've always been. It's just that they've taken you on a journey to get you to believe what they want you to believe. And so that's really the first thing I want you to look at. What were they like in the beginning, and what were you like in the beginning, and what are you like now, or what are they like now? And so really pay attention to that, because the ugliness is not something that happened over time. It is not your fault. It is not something that you did. It is not something that you said. It is not the 20 pounds that you gained. That didn't make them the ugly person. The truth is, they were always that person, and you're expecting them to change is not going to change them. And there is some truth to this that can be very disturbing. And I've had conversations with people feeling that they were really in a very dangerous situation and they needed to get out. But they said, no, he would never harm me. He would never hurt me. So if you're in a situation like that, then you're some of the people I'm talking to, right? So always remember, who a person is in time is who they've always been. Because the truth is, when you start a relationship, when you start a job, when you start a ministry, when you start trying to bring someone into your corner, you're the best version of yourself that you can be. I've seen this played out so many times. And very often what someone who is truly narcissistic will do is they burn bridges. It's like they'll use people to a certain extent, and when they're done, because they're moving on to something better, they will destroy the people that were aiding them, were in their corner, assisting them, helping them, counseling them, their pastors. They will burn all of those bridges. And there's this very fine line right down the middle, like, you were in my corner, you're no longer in my corner. You don't get to know anything about me. And then there's the side over here. And this is something that you will see through the course of their life. They're friends with somebody, and they might even have a timeline. Sometimes it'll be a year, 2 years. Most of the time, in the people that I can think of, it can be somewhere between 5 to 7 years is usually normal, or 7 to 10 years. So there's something about that. They can play this outward act with people for a period of time, and the people around them will think you're amazing, you're so generous, you're so kind, you're so loving, you're so giving, only to find out that one day it's over. And you're going, how did that happen? What happened? Where did you go? Like, I don't understand what actually took place here. And you're left going, what did I do? What did I say? That's that narcissistic thing. But what you find out is that there's been all these stories that have been told about you behind the scenes to people that you don't know, that's their new group of people, and all of a sudden you're going, wow, I didn't do that. Right? And so that's one of the ways that a narcissist will actually work. So because we're not really talking about narcissists, abusive people will do this at times as well. So being that putting the best foot forward, till you get the thing that you're after, the person you're after, the title you're after, the job position you're after, the whatever it is that you're after, until you get that. Then once you get that, then it doesn't matter anymore, and then you're ready to turn away and walk away from the whole thing. So it's as we as individuals begin to see that individual in time, as we begin to see the mask slip, as we begin to see the words or hear the words come forward that pierce our soul, those things that are said that cause us to cringe or to shrink back or lose our voice, it's that right there that that when we know that we're dealing with somebody who's maybe not as kind and generous as they first appeared to be. So you'll see this in time. If you're in a relationship with someone like that, or you know that you are currently stuck in a situation like that, you go, yeah, that's who my boss was in the beginning. And I can, give you examples. Years ago, I worked at a place, and, I took on a management position, and the owner was really great, bringing me flowers all the time, saying I did a great job, saying, that, they wish that they'd had me for the last 5 years. And then I can't even remember what it was that happened. And I worked nights. And so my phone was ringing. I got home at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. My phone was ringing. And I didn't answer it. And this was before you could shut your phone off, right? And the phone was ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. And there was something that had happened that had displeased my boss. And so I'm trying to sleep here. And they're like, I don't care. And they're yelling and screaming on the other end of the phone. And you're like, wow, okay. So the whole kindness thing was just an act. It's not even really real. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about, because the mask had slipped. There was never an apology, and there rarely is. And yes, it is true that very often narcissists will indeed be in the church. You will find many of them in leadership in the church, because they love the honor. They love getting the attention. They love getting the gifts. They love, all of the praise that comes with it, the accolades and the ability to stand at the front and hold the mic and speak a word. Lots of narcissists love the church. So you have to be careful when you're in an environment, when you're in a church and you're watching them and you're going, this seems familiar to me. Pay attention. Because when you get into a relationship with somebody who is a narcissist in the church, they will use you in the same way that someone in a relationship will use you. It will just look a little different and sound a little bit different. They will use you for, your gifts, your abilities, your willingness to serve, your willingness to do the things that they don't want to do. They don't want to lose you, so they'll treat you like a servant. They'll treat you, they'll give you, false promises. Yes, I will allow you to run this course that you want to run, but it never happens. And you find yourself going, you've told me this 3 times, but it's not happening. What's up with that? Or all of a sudden you'll go in and you've got some good news to share, and they don't want to give you the time of day. They won't talk to you, won't look at you. They walk right by you as if you don't exist. That happens in the church too. So it's not about guarding your heart. But it is about guarding your heart. It's about paying attention and allowing the discernment of the Lord to work in you, so that you know how to move forward and how to work through this relationship. So what happens in time in any relationship is that a person's true character will eventually be seen by how they respond under stress. It's easy to be a kind, wonderful, generous individual, giving to people in need, doing great things publicly to be seen. But when they're under stress, you might find or know that, be unfortunately privy to an exchange behind the scenes that tears an individual apart, or where they're so angry they're jumping up and down with their fists clenched and they're yelling and they're screaming and they're saying nasty things about another individual. Paying attention to that. True colors and true character will be seen in time. It cannot be dismissed. You have to look at that and go, that might be a display of anger. How many times am I going to see it, and how many times am I going to allow myself to be a part of it, or to be the sounding board or the punching bag for this kind of behavior? That is a decision you need to make. How do they act when they're exhausted? Do they become grumpy? Do they become miserable? Do they become difficult? Do they become harsh with their words? How do they respond in situations like that? What about conflict, when somebody comes up to them and they want to give a critique, or they want to, give them a little piece of, unsolicited advice, or maybe they want to tell them something that they don't want to hear? How do they respond in those moments? How do they respond when they're angry? Does their mouth just say a whole lot of things that shouldn't be said? Are they sorry after? What are you seeing on their face? What are you hearing coming out of their mouth? These are all things to take a look at. So the person, like I said, that's in a new relationship or in a public environment, they can be very fake. And the reason is because those people don't know them. This is why for pastors or leaders or people who are CEOs, people that are in charge, they can be very fake in certain situations because they don't have any investment in it. The people that are around them, they don't care about their heart. They don't care about how they feel. They don't care about how they come across, because that's not the goal. The goal is, what do they want? And so being in a public setting, they could be charming, they could be funny, they can be all of those things. And the people that are in that room will buy it up every single time, because that's fake. But it's who they are as a general rule, all the time, every day, that's going to show you who they really are. And like I said, the mask will eventually slip. So if you're starting a relationship or you're starting a workplace, we call those great displays of affection and attention love bombing. I didn't know that years ago when my boss was buying me flowers and gifts and doing all that kind of stuff. I didn't know that that's what they called it. We know now it's called love bombing. So when you see that kind of thing, let your red flag come up, or at least let a yellow flag come up. Let a caution come up. Don't just run into it and go, yeah, that's exactly, this is my knight in shining armor. This is the best boss I've ever had, because if it doesn't last, you're going to be in for a very difficult season. So after the true colors emerge, it is also very common for the fake person to show up momentarily from time to time, because they feel might not feel guilty, but because they don't want you to leave, or they want to continue to manipulate you. And if you're beneficial to them and beneficial to what they're wanting to do, they're going to do that. They can be angry, they can be mean, they can be ugly, they can say all sorts of things, they can ignore you, they can be harsh. But then all of a sudden you'll see that gentle, kind, generous individual come forward one more time, and they'll come bearing gifts, and they'll have a smile, and they'll be like, I just appreciate you so much, and thank you so much for being there for me, and I didn't mean that. Apologies come difficult. They're not easy to do for people who are narcissistic. Narcissists do not apologize. So if you know somebody who's hurt you and they've never come forward and said, I'm sorry, You might be dealing with a narcissist. Pay attention to that. If they do apologize, they're apologizing with a hook in it, right? So they're going, I'm going to apologize to you and I'm going to pull you back in because I need to pull you back in because you're valuable to me and you make me look good or you make me sound good or, whatever the other thing is, I need you to finish this project that we're on, or, so those are some of the things also to look at. That, and I hear this all the time in relationships that people are here and they talk to me and they go, well, he was always so kind and so generous. He treated me like a queen when we first got together. He bought me gifts. He did these things. And now, like, I don't even know the person that I'm with. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, but that is how abuse works. You don't need to stay. If you are in danger, if you are in harm, you don't need to stay. You have the option of leaving that relationship. You don't need to die for love, like physically, or be injured or damaged for the rest of your life because you've been wounded. No, you do not. And so, consider the words that I say in this short video today. See, the thing is when these abusive individuals are nice, it's so that they get what they want. There's always the hook. I always say this, when you're dealing with a narcissist or whatever, sorry, I keep itching my nose. I have seasonal allergies, so I'm sorry. But, with a narcissist, their generosity and their gift giving, their money giving always comes with a hook. I've done this for you. Now you need to do this for me. So it's never just a here, go do with it what you want. God bless you. You go be blessed. Let God do with you, let him use you, let him work through you. There's also a great deal of jealousy with people that are narcissistic, right? So, or in abusive relationships. So pay attention to those things because, they're nice because they want something from you. They're nice, and their niceness reinforces their self-centeredness actually, because they need you and they want something for you. And so they're not being nice for the sake of being nice. They're being nice to serve themselves. So that's a self-centered reason to give or to do or to buy things or to be even kind and generous with your words. So they manipulate, and it's so that they can manipulate again, not because they want to love you, not because they do love you, not because they even care if you love them, but it's about how they look. And so if you're not kind to them, or if you retaliate, or if you stand up or you walk away, you don't make them look good. And they don't like that. So be prepared if you do decide to do that and you are dealing with a narcissistic individual, you need to know that what's going to happen there is there's going to be a lot of word salad slung your way. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to be said that are not true to make them look good and you look bad. They will lie. Yes, even leaders in the church. We like to call this in the church a spirit of Jezebel. So there is a very strong connection between Jezebel and narcissism. Leviathan is also a part of that trio. So knowing what you're dealing with and the spirit that's behind it is important. So the thing is if you as a nice individual, you as an individual who has no narcissistic tendencies, you can still have a bad day. We all have bad days. We all wake up sometimes and go, man, I'm grumpy today and I don't know how to manage my emotions and I'm kind of punchy. I want to say some things or do some things or act in a certain way. You can still override that and be kind. And when you're in an abusive relationship, there's nothing to hold that back. They wake up grumpy, they take it out on everybody around them. So you can wake up and have a bad day, but you're still going to have morals. You're still going to have, certain things lines that you won't cross. Where again, when you're in an abusive relationship, especially if there's narcissism that's there, there's no boundaries. I've heard it said by somebody that, sometimes you just, and this individual was talking about an affair that they had, and they had broken up 2 marriages, theirs and the other one. And their response was this: sometimes you just have to do what you have to do and clean up the mess afterward. And I go, don't you feel bad about the fact that you hurt your kids, their spouse, your spouse? And they were like, no, sometimes you got to do what you got to do and just move forward and clean it up after. And I'm like, okay. And that was my response. I'm like, that's pretty harsh. That's pretty harsh. Like you've destroyed. And then they were wondering why in the church and in their line of business they had nobody that was going to stand with them. And I'm like, really? And so just a bit of a something to look at there. What are you dealing with? And for you as an individual, knowing how they express anger and respect matter, because you can be angry and still be respectful. You can be angry and not lash out to hurt somebody. You can be upset and you can be very angry and not try to cut an individual into pieces so that they feel all the pain and all of the like they're emotionally bleeding all over the place. If you are a nice person and do not have these tendencies, even when you're angry, your thought is not to damage the other person. So pay attention to that as well. So what's the bottom line here? You can have a bad day and not be abusive. So if you're with somebody that's having a bad day and they are abusive, and that's been their consistent pattern, is that they're having a bad day and then they're abusive. They're verbally abusive. They're physically abusive. They're, whatever way abusive. They're demanding and they're, taking what they want. Those are all things to pay attention to. And like I said, this might be a difficult conversation for some, of which I apologize, but it is something that we need to take a look at. And it is something that, is often brought forward in the inner healing work that I do. So as we look at this again, it's looking at it and going, is this a wounding that's coming forward from the past that you need to look at and pull apart and ask Jesus to come in and heal? Or is this a narcissistic personality disorder? So I'm guessing, and in my opinion, it's not like everybody is a narcissist. That is not the case. And sometimes this is what it is. They just need to work through some stuff in order to become a better, a more empathetic individual. So be encouraged today. Thank you for listening to session number 1 on abuse and relationships. So be encouraged today if you're in this. Hopefully, as we go through this, I'm going to give you some hints. I'm going to give you some wisdom. I'm going to give you some things, conversations I've had with people who I've talked with through the years that might help you to be able to determine what your next steps should be. I will not tell you what your next steps should be, but I want to encourage you to reach out in prayer. I want you to, if you want to, you can reach out, and I will answer you. I will respond when I have the time to do so. Be encouraged today. God loves you. So thank you for joining me today on Real, Raw, and Honest. We'll see you next week.